Good. Okay. A sincerely warm welcome to the webinar this afternoon. I'm really excited to be here and joined by Angela Ransby and Ashley Jacobs from the Raedwald Academy Trust. This afternoon's webinar is specifically focused on reimagining alternative provision in Suffolk. And I think we're all aware that the current model leaves a lot to be desired, and that there are some things that we can do better, but that requires us to think creatively, and it requires us to work collaboratively. And I'm very, very excited to hear from some people who've been doing exactly that. So we're going to put our cameras off so that you can sort of focus on what people are saying, but I will just briefly introduce everybody. So this is Angela Ransby. Angela, hi.
Hi.
Angela is the CEO of the Academy Trust at Raedwald, and Ashley Jacobs, hello.
Hello.
Ashley is the pedagogical lead at the Raedwald Academy Trust. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Lauren Meadows. I'm the director at Greenfields Education, and I'm really, really excited to be talking to Angela and Ashley this afternoon. So over the course of the last academic year, the Raedwald Academy Trust was commissioned to explore a new approach to alternative provision across Suffolk. And as one head teacher said to me earlier on today, there's not often an awful lot of good news about this type of thing. So it's really good for us to be unpicking some of the positives from this. So this new model was called the Pathways model, and I'm going to come to you, Ashley, first of all, and Angela. What is the Pathways model?
So it's a project that we proposed to Suffolk County Council following the Timpson report, and in Suffolk there's subsequently a policy development panel established to review AP in Suffolk more generally. And so what we came up with in response to this was a model that was comprised of what we called 4 different pathways, and we launched this in September 2020, and it was made up of these 4 pathways. So we picked some names that we thought were representative of what we wanted each pathway to be, and the first one was one called Springboard, and so we created a pathway that is 12 weeks in duration and offers 2 days a week on-site PRU support, and then 3 days a week in school. And what was different for us this year, or when we launched the pathway, was that originally that model of a 2-day PRU placement, 3-day mainstream placement had been fairly exclusive to just Key Stage 1. And what we were keen to explore was how effective that could be if we extended that model into Key Stage 2 and 3. So that's what we did. The next model the next pathway we looked at was one that we called Building Pathway, and we designed this pathway to be longer, going from 6 to 19 weeks and a 5-day-a-week PRU placement. The difference for this was that alongside this we developed really clear dual placement agreements that had clear start and end dates to try to keep the flow of children through PRU going throughout the year. Our experience historically had been that many children tend to get stuck in AP or PRU for lots of different reasons, and we were keen to try to work out a system that could sort of encourage an even flow throughout the year, so families, mainstream schools, children were able to access PRU support as and when they need it. Next pathway we looked at was one that we called Focused. This one was specifically for young people in Key Stage 4. And we set out the parameters around this that it would be a 1 to 6 term placement for young people in Key Stage 4 who were either permanently excluded or at risk of permanent exclusion. And we felt it was really important to set this pathway up as a longer term option, recognizing that disjointed education for Key Stage 4 pupils has a significant detrimental impact on their overall outcomes longer term. And so we were keen to give the local area the opportunity to sort of dip into that for short term if needed, or longer term if that was felt to be more appropriate and supportive of the young person. And then finally, the last pathway that we developed last year was one that we called Next Steps. And the intention behind that pathway was that it would be a 1 to 4 term offer, and in response to needs within the local area in terms of a lack of provision for specialist placements for young people. We devised this pathway to be a bit more flexible in terms of what the overall curriculum looked like, and some flexibility in terms of the profile of pupils that we would work with.
So it's interesting, actually, you talk there about each pathway having a different identity, and having a different length of time, everything I think from sort of 6 to 12 weeks right up to 4 terms and beyond. And you've also alluded to shortage of specialist placements locally, and the desire to free up the flow of pupils moving through PRU. And I suppose that other than the length of the placements, what I'm really interested in is why the need for 4 different pathways.
Why indeed? I think there's loads of research, and I think getting curriculum in PRUs is it's not well researched. There's lots of variable opinions about what that looks like, and so we needed to create these 4 different pathways to allow us to develop a curriculum offer that was that gave us the flexibility to build a curriculum that was compatible to the different presenting needs that of children that came to us. We needed pathways that subsequently had an associated curriculum that was agile, could evolve, and could give the local area mainstream schools, commissioners, families, options in terms of what curriculum provision could look like.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because as mainstream school leaders, sometimes we feel trapped, or potentially the options are limited when we know that pupils need a different type or style of education. And sort of what you're doing with the 4 different pathways is to free some of those shackles and to open that up a little bit more broadly. It's also incredibly exciting to hear AP providers talking about the need for robust curriculum provision, because ultimately every pupil deserves a first-class education regardless of who they are or where they attend school. And the idea that that's a sort of central focus of the pathways development is incredibly exciting.
I just think it's been such a key portion of what we've been trying to develop, because I'm sure anyone will be aware that the parameters around PRUs is that you don't necessarily have to follow the national curriculum. But what we came to realize is that actually, if we're going to be a service to schools and a service to children and supporting them to access mainstream education, that we need to be offering a curriculum that is at least on par with what mainstream peers are receiving. Not only because that is as a minimum what our schools and children need to be able to successfully integrate, but also just because we have a duty of care to any child that comes through to us to provide at least a minimum curriculum offer that's aligned with the national curriculum.
That is so refreshing and exciting to hear. So when you take on a project of this scale and you're sort of innovating and trialing things that potentially are huge game changers, I guess that the absolute central part of that is being really clear about what you wanted to achieve with this model. So let me sort of throw that open to you both. What is it that you were hoping to get out of this?
I think, if I can come in on that, I think Ashley describes very well, I think, the intention to put the curriculum at the core of provision that children accessing PRU and alternative provision receive, and so that if this thinking sort of starts from there and it comes out, but more generally, I think that there is a need, I think, for alternative provision and for the Raedwald Trust through these pathways to really kind of assert its position that it is a service to schools. Certainly it teaches children, and certainly it needs to be a first-class premium service to children in an educational environment, but fundamentally it's a service to schools because it's trying to keep children connected with their peers and in an inclusive agenda. So in a local area, regardless of the parameters that either local areas, institutions or national government kind of puts in place. Our duty remains, I think, not to fracture children from their entitlement to be educated alongside and with their peers. And so the pathways, I think, enable that to happen because they allow us a framework through which we're able to rapidly put in place a well understood and clearly communicated curriculum. That the range of pathways allows us to group children according to presenting need and therefore matched intervention. So it's not the case any longer that you could talk about a child requiring a PRU placement. The PRU placement is the physical building, it's the programme and the pathway that sits within that I think is really key around what we're trying to achieve. So we talk about children needing support or accessing alternative provision at a much more day-to-day lived experience of the child rather than just the infrastructure or the organisation, I suppose, that puts them on a roll or not. And I think if it starts from there, then the pathways kind of the rubric of the pathways are established on those principles. Then it means that the strategies that are employed and applied to children and the interventions are co-owned, co-developed, co-tested, and between the pathway, the staff, the people working within alternative provision, but also the mainstream school. So those children belong to multiple people who each have an accountability for ensuring they're accessing first-class education, as opposed to a mainstream child, a PRU child, whatever that means. And I think that language shifts a mindset about not what children are attending, but what their day-to-day program is, regardless of whether that's hosted in an alternative provision academy or hosted in a mainstream school. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the emphasis on strengthening your transparent relationships with mainstream schools it is so important. Often it feels like there's a disconnect between mainstream schools and access to alternative provision services, for whatever reason that is, and that idea of sort of throwing your doors open and becoming schools without walls, if you like, is really exciting. I also am really interested. You have created a very strong identity about the profile of each pathway, and the potential purpose and community or demographic that each pathway would serve. And it's interesting because that's not something we've historically seen. AP has become synonymous with the kind of breadth of needs that we see, but actually this seems to be aimed at bringing more clarity about the best way to serve individual pupils. Very exciting. So the million-dollar question is, you trialed this for a year. Did it work? How successful was it, and how do you know?
I mean, I think we are in a position as an organisation, we've matured enough, I think, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years to be able to understand ourselves well enough to set up pragmatic metrics against which we can judge whether what we're doing is having anywhere close to the impact that we hoped it would. So what I mean by that, I suppose, is that with the pathways, it's the evaluation criteria against which we would answer those questions. And I'll let Ashley kind of speak about that in more detail. Was considered from the outset, as opposed to retrospectively kind of applied, because we were finding ourselves in a local area or a situation that was firefighting and reacting all of the time. So whilst the Raedwald Trust certainly is still in the position where it's part of a local area that's needing to rapidly respond to presenting difficulties and challenges for children, its ability to think through what it is that's going to allow us to deem whether the pathways are a success or not was more considered. Ashley, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the evaluation.
Yeah. So what we did in the summer term through well, through joint working with Suffolk County Council and following further developments through the policy development panel, is we ran our own evaluation of the project, because we recognize that, well, A, we have a duty to be transparent about how we're doing things, but because we needed to have a really clear understanding about what had gone well and what we needed to look at revising and improving for subsequent years, because we're quite keen to get this right. So I guess the main findings within the model, and I guess bearing in mind that this was all overshadowed by the pandemic.
Just a little.
I think our biggest finding was that we need to, further evaluate. However, even within a context of COVID, we found that certain things had an impact. So in terms of beginning to chip away at a shared understanding about what the model could mean and what it could mean to mainstream schools and families, and what PRU or AP could even do in the local community in terms of inclusion, that improved. And we know that because we ran surveys with families, we completed structured interviews, we did lots of bits to just understand that impact. We knew that it had increased our own capacity. So we're commissioned for a set number of places, but within this model, and dependent on adherence to start and end dates for pupils, it actually allows us to double the number of children that we can work with through an academic year, and substantially so commissioned for just under 200 and able to work with nearly 400. So doubling the number of children that we can work with. So bits like that, I think, are the real sort of successes that we need. Because the more pupils that we can support, the more pupils that we can help to re-engage with mainstream school, I think ultimately that's the success measure of the Pathways model.
I'm really interested in that, Ashley, and I'm as ever, humbled by the integrity of your organisation, that you are independently evaluating the sort of spend and resource that you've thrown at this. It shows a real desire to adopt a sense of collective responsibility and collective servitude to a group of pupils who really need the very best of everything we can offer. And I also think it's interesting you talking about proactively seeking those pupils who need support through different placements and pathways. I'm absolutely gobsmacked at you doubling the number of places that you're able to offer. And I would guess that the kind of real challenge is making sure that the right schools understand what you've got to offer and how you can support their pupils, and that there's a kind of clear flow of access to those pathways, so that you end up with pupils matched with the right pathway and the right setting and the right support. So clearly from your evaluation, you'll have found things that have been successes. And what I suppose I'm also interested in, you've continued with the project this academic year. While part of that is to further evaluate the impact of it, I hope that we'll see the successes replicated through further evaluation. What's different in 21-22?
So I guess I'll touch on a bit more of I sort of alluded to a few of the key findings before, but I guess what we found was further that our quality of education across all of our sites improved, and we measured that in terms of curriculum coverage using external curriculum reviews, ongoing discussion, CPD. In broadly speaking, again against the backdrop of COVID, our attendance levels remained the same, slightly increased again. Reduced timetables though, our rates of reduced timetables decreased. And people and family feedback was really, really positive. But what we also found through the evaluation was that there was a need to develop more strategies around collaboration with the local area in terms of commissioners, mainstream schools, to make sure that everybody could become conversant in the model and really have a deep understanding of it. Equally, we uncovered that we needed to become better at compatibility assessments. And so then for this year, what we've decided to do is that we're going to start to research and understand what other people in the country are doing in terms of compatibility assessments, and how they create cohesive cohorts where young people are safe and they're having their educational needs met through intelligent decision making and collaborative work between agencies. We are looking at the referral system. Through last year, we worked really well with Suffolk County to develop transparent systems and information sharing, and we're looking to continue to develop that so that the pace and the ease of access that mainstream schools have to PRU support continues to improve. Schools no longer worry about whether or not they'll get a child in, because they know that there's lots of spaces available, because we all have a shared understanding that adherence to dual placement agreements makes the model work. We've further refined our pathways offer for this year. Sorry, I am rambling, Lauren.
That's great. No. I'm genuinely riveted. Keep going.
So what we've looked at further then, so on the basis of what we found in the evaluation, we then further refined what our actual pathways looked like. So in terms of our building pathway, which last year was run as a 5-day-a-week provision, what we actually got back from from commissioners, so Suffolk County Council and schools and families, was that we weren't doing enough to support transition of children back into mainstream schools. So through discussions, we agreed that the building pathway model would be 4 days a week of PRU support with 1 day a week of outreach support delivered via our staff, but pupils would be supported in their mainstream school. And we're trialing that this year because we think that that's the real key to inclusion, because it means that pupils in a PRU they experience a real disconnect when they come to PRU, and that 1 day a week allows them to stay connected.
Actually, let me interject there. I think that's a really interesting discussion, that idea of the kind of collective responsibility for ensuring that pupils have not just their needs met in the immediate instance, but also that needs are met over time, with the ultimate aim for PRU pupils to return to mainstream successfully. And I'm interested in that because historically, that's perhaps would have been our perception of what pre-placement was about. But I think in modern times, more recently, that perception has been compromised, perhaps because pre-placements have been adopted by pupils who are perhaps waiting for specialist placement or needing something very bespoke. But you're saying that through your kind of strengthened outreach work and through the adjustment of that pathways model, you're really looking to work collaboratively with schools so that the preferred future for each pupil is to return back to mainstream over time. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So can I ask a couple of questions then? How many placements are you able to offer through this revised model for this academic year?
Top of my head, 380.
Okay, so 380 placements across 4 pathways, serving different types of people, serving different needs, and serving a very broad spectrum of the local area. I'm particularly interested in this kind of strong collaboration between Suffolk County Council, between schools, and between yourselves. Because clearly these pathways require really joined up thinking, if you like, about how best to meet these people's needs. I'm also particularly interested that you say one of the findings was that the quality of education significantly improved following your work on curriculum offer, which clearly will build mainstream schools' confidence that when pupils come to you, they'll still be receiving a good quality curriculum offer. Are there any aspects of your offer this year that are new or that are particularly exciting that you really would love schools to know about?
Oh, absolutely. So we have implemented the Raedwald Trust Readers for Life curriculum, and that's across all key stages. And what it is a purpose-built curriculum for children in AP. Never been done before. Strong focus on oracy, but it is our commitment that any child, young person that comes through our doors gets a daily explicitly taught reading lesson, 30 minutes a day, every day. And we did that because we recognize that the vast majority of pupils that find themselves in AP or PRU have significant difficulties with reading and literacy. So we're really excited, and it's been really successful, and we've had engagement across all key stages. It's really exciting, and that is a new development.
That is incredible. I mean, you know, just talking about your adaptations to pathways models, your introduction of your new reading curriculum, the fact that you're able to offer so many more placements. As a mainstream school, there's a lot about this that is encouraging, and you know, this is a good news day, isn't it, for alternative provision? So, you know, if we've got head teachers around the county, or even, you know, further afield, who are wanting to connect with you to talk about this offer and to talk about what it looks like or how they might access it, where would people go to find out some more?
I mean, I think that, you know, fundamentally the swiftest point of contact is through the website, isn't it? So raedwaldtrust.com is where you will find us and contacts within that. But we are small and beautifully formed, and so that does mean that any one of us, you know, is able to respond to queries about either how our pathways are working on particular sites, or how our Readers for Life kind of curriculum is working, or our medical needs programs are working, because we make our decisions as a trust in collectively together, and then we implement as one sort of joined up force, more than the sum of our component parts and all that. So Raedwald Trust, certainly, you know, people are able to contact me, contact Ashley, contact any one of the leaders, heads of school that are posted on there, and you would come through to the same message, the same level of intelligence about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it. It's absolutely crucial for us, I think, that we see ourselves as, like I say, a service to mainstream education, but also looking for kind of people to work with in other sectors of the educational landscape. So other PRUs, other alternative provisions, you know, what is it that collectively we can do better? We do work at pace at the Raedwald Trust, and that does mean that we have an idea and we think, oh, you know, blimey, that needs to be done yesterday. And so more than the sum of our component parts, I think, is where that sits, isn't it? We're able to harness the skills and knowledge of multiple people to roll things out, pull back, review, change, refine, and keep going. The Suffolk County Council are definitely, certainly senior officers at Suffolk County Council are definitely working with us and alongside us within that, which is fabulous news. But certainly through the website is where people can get whatever we have whenever they want it.
That's incredible, and what an absolutely thrilling time to be the pioneers of alternative provision in and around Suffolk. I can't help but think of all the lives that you'll reach through this innovation, and innovation is hard. It challenges us, and the fact that you're doing it with such integrity and transparency is admirable, and probably a good lesson to us all. As Angela has said, if any of you have got any questions, whether that's about the pathways model, about the reading curriculum, or anything else, please don't hesitate to get in touch. In the meantime, that leaves me to say thank you for joining us, and watch out, world, the Raedwald Trust are on their way.
Thank you, Lauren.